Jack, and my project is on concussions. So at the beginning of class, I had you guys fill out an opening survey on some of the statistics, right? Have you guys all completed that?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Boeggeman, thank you. So one of the questions was estimate how many concussions you think occur each year. So let's see what you guys think. And so this is not like this is just in the United States alone. So what did you guys? Go ahead, Nick.
I said about 5 to 9,000.
5 to 9,000. Okay. There we go. All right. Nick.
10 million.
10 million. All right. Let's see who else. Romy.
I said 117.
117. Just flat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Kate, go ahead.
59,000.
59,000. Okay. So, you guys are kind of. Let me show you some of the
It's kind of a wide range.
Well, we got a wide range, but so the CDC estimates each year. You can't really properly detect how many concussions because it's so difficult to diagnose, but there's about 1.6 to 3.8 million. Okay.
What's the CDC?
So it's the Center for Disease Control over in Atlanta. So this is where they're getting all their annual reports, okay? And so in the United States alone, high school athletes sustain about 300,000 concussions per year.
That's just high school.
Just high school, yeah. And then so for every year, 67,000 of those are football players.
Wow.
Okay? And so another statistic that the CDC threw out was that about 5 to 10% of any athlete will experience a concussion in any sports season. So, let's move on. The next question I had you guys, what do you guys think a concussion is? Change my slides. Nick Peterson.
The brain moving inside the cranium and bruise.
Okay. So brain moving inside what? The skull?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a few definitions. A lot of you guys are good. You got the general concept. So I have a few definitions from Mayo Clinic, Dictionary.com, and then the CDC. The CDC defines a concussion as a type of traumatic brain injury, or a TBI, that's caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head that can change the way your brain normally works. Concussions can also occur from a fall or blow to the body that causes the head or brain to move quickly back and forth. Okay? So you guys, a lot of you guys did well on that. So a bit of an overview. What I'm going to be focusing on is the causes and symptoms, the physics, and then we're going to get into a little bit more in depth. We're going to focus on biomechanics, which is going to focus on brain tissue, blood and electrical flow in the brain, and the neurochemistry. So we're going to talk about neurotransmitters, what a normal brain looks like versus a concussed brain, and some of the ionic fluxes and the chemicals working in the brain. And then I'll finish with some risk factors and some preventative actions for you guys. Okay. On your opening survey, I think I asked you guys that if you guys have ever experienced a concussion. What do you guys, if you have, I know a lot of you guys, football players, so if you've had a concussion in any sport, what did you guys feel like? Okay.
I don't really remember like immediately after it happens. I remember waking up the next day though, and for the couple days after that, with like migraines and like sensitivity to light.
Okay. Good. Chris, I saw your hand. Yeah.
I feel dizzy.
Dizzy. Okay. Right. Nick.
Loss of speech or speech impairment.
Okay. That's all. These are all common signs. So here's a list of like what you would feel as for like if you experience a concussion. So obviously you're gonna have a headache, pressure to the head, and that's gonna be because of what we're gonna go into, some bruising and stuff. Amnesia, so your loss of memory from the event. You're gonna feel tired. You might lose consciousness, but that depends on like the severity of the concussion. And you're gonna have that dizziness and that foggy feeling, not feeling, and that might have to do with the yellow tint, sort of, not feeling like something's not right. Okay. So next, we're going to get into the physics, okay? So a concussion, like you guys said, it's the brain sits in your skull, right? And it's surrounded by, it's just this ball of just jello, basically. And it sits in this cerebral fluid. And so any sort of knock, bump, or jolt to the head, it can cause the brain, see in the little diagram here, it sits here in the fluid, and if you get a concussion, concussion, like let's say 2 football players are getting hit with a helmet, the brain will bounce forward to the skull and ricochet back and forth like that. So that's going to cause bruising. Now we're going to get into a little bit more in-depth look at concussions. So we're going to talk about biomechanics, right? So we got the definition up here. So it's the study of mechanical laws relating to the movement of the structure of living organisms. So it's like physics, but for biology. And so this has a lot to do with concussions because we're talking about the force of the brain hitting the skull and how this all affects concussion and how someone's getting injured. So some of the examples I have, the punch from a boxer and the amount of pressure like a femur can withstand, so breaking your leg or something like that. And here's how like a message flows through it, okay? So there's dendrites here, there's little extensions here, and it's going to have, like there might be another cell. So think of it as like, here's this part, and this part would connect right here. And that's how your brain sends these messages, yeah. So, and what we're going to focus on too for the chemical and neurochemistry. So here's how neurotransmitters work. And so in between, like we had, here's our little... So, what's happening at the, so what's called this space right here, this is the synapse, in the space in between 2 neurons. This message is getting communicated, and we're using neurotransmitters, which are these chemicals in the brain, which are made up of, you know, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen. And so, from one dendrite, it sends to the axon terminal, or an axon terminal sends it to the dendrite. And so these chemicals, they get recepted from one cell to another, and that's how we get these chemical messages throughout our brain. Okay? And it usually it's a very quick process, but so that's just a general. So back to the electrical flow. Here's our little neurons right here, and so basically what happens in a concussion, the neurons, they get twisted up, right? So your brain is getting pushed and pulled and twisted when a concussion happens, and so this can tear. Well, the tearing of a neuron is called axon shedding. So it's basically like these cells are getting torn apart, so you can't communicate. So the result, it can result in, yeah.
How many neurons do we have in our brain?
Trillions. So now we're going to go into some neurochemistry. So neurotransmitters, they're chemical messengers of the brain, and so I have a little list. There's a ton of neurotransmitters, but these are like the major ones that we use in our brain. And so all these, and when a concussion happens, our neurochemistry gets thrown off. So all these neurotransmitters, we get, basically this impact causes all these neurotransmitters and other chemicals in the brain to just try and make sense of what just happened. So there's this imbalance. Your brain does a really good job of keeping a balance in your chemicals. So all these neurotransmitters are very well, they're balanced out. And so when a concussion happens, the brain tries to sort of readjust when that happens. And
So it's overreacting. It's reacting more than it needs to.
yeah, it's overworking because it doesn't know what happened. So they're sending out all these chemicals to see what happened to those neurons after a concussion. And so these changes, these rapid changes, are called ionic fluxes. Okay? And so a little bit in depth, I have a little diagram that I found. And so here you can see, over here, we got, if you can read it all over. So we have, here's our Na plus, and we have our K plus, and so these stay balanced out, right? So at rest, 3 of these go out, and 2 of these go in, okay? And so when a concussion happens, you can see there's some damage right there. It's being twisted and pulled out from the force of the concussion. Yeah.
If someone gets a concussion, what does that mean for their future? Like, what does that mean? Like, if they get more concussions?
So that's a good question. Yeah. So your first concussion is probably not going to be as severe, but as you get, that's what happens after your first concussion. If you get a second one, you're going to be more prone, and the symptoms are usually going to be a lot more drastic.
So can you die eventually?
If you get hit in the head enough, yeah, you probably could die. Yeah.
That's funny.
If,
Well, it's not funny.
no. But so anyway, yeah. So if you guys get a little general idea of the chemistry inside, Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of concussions to where you like pass the limit of like really bad for you?
I wouldn't be able to tell like the record for like most concussions
Not like
and
the
like
record, but, like,
surviving.
is there like a certain reason you said like the first one isn't that bad? Is it like after like the fourth or fifth or starts to be permanent damage, or is that like?
I don't think it's the amount, it's like the shorten it, like the time in between concussions. So if you suffer one and then you suffer a second one, and that's why it's important. We're going to go into proper concussion laws and stuff.
Doesn't it depend on the person too?
Yeah, so we'll go into, you guys are asking all the right questions. I'm going to talk about the risk factors, who's going to be more prone to suffering a concussion. If you're a child getting concussed, it's going to have a larger effect than your adult because your brain is still developing, and so having this concussion is not going to allow your brain to properly develop.